everyone, I welcome you again in another discussion of Master Mains PYQ. Today we will discuss second question in your geography section of GS1. So yesterday we discussed a question which was related to climate change and food security. Today the question is related to very important topic, very liked topic by UPSC, that is water stress and water crisis. The question reads, why is the world today confronted with a crisis of availability of and access to freshwater resources? It was a 10 marker. You have to use 150 words. Again, you have limited amount of time to write this question. If I can map this question to a certain part of syllabus, then that will be very clearly the distribution of key natural resources in GS1 of your GS syllabus. So, how to prepare and how to write answer to this question. So this question is asking why is, meaning reasons for. Two things. Number one, availability, and number two, access to. So this is nothing but water crisis. Availability of water and access to water. Fine. So you will make two different dimensions in your body part. Availability, why there is a crisis of availability, and then second will be why there is a crisis of excess of water. So this way you will write the answer. Now how to prepare this topic. So if you look at the PYQs from this particular area, that is water stress or water resources, freshwater resources, UPSC has been asking very direct and single type of questions. So if you look at 2015, they have asked a similar question, but that was on India. The scope was not world, it was India. In 2016, they have asked management of water resources and why mismanagement leads to water scarcity. The same idea. In 2018, they have asked very specific question. It was related to urban areas, it was related to groundwater, and it was related to water harvesting. Effectiveness of water harvesting, how we can improve it to resolve the depletion of groundwater in urban areas. It was a very specific question in 2018. In 2019, they have asked water stress, but its regional distribution across India. That was the question. In 2021, again they have asked urban areas and water stress. So one thing is very clear, that UPSC is very much interested in this topic. The other thing which you should have noticed, that every day when you read newspaper or you read any magazine, you will find one or two articles there on water stress. Water is a major commodity. Water is a major requirement for us for survival. The agriculture ecosystem, it all depends on water. All industries depend on water, and we as humans depend on water. Fine. So we see that there is a lot of news over climate change, and there is a lot of news over floods. There is a lot of news over incessant rain, or let's say cloudburst. In India also, around the world also, cyclonic activity is also there. The water cycle is being disrupted. We read a lot of news on pollution of water. So all these factors, all these news make it more important than it already is. So water is very important to us. There is a lot of news on it, and that's why UPSC always asks a question or two on this area. So you can prepare it. You will read a lot of newspaper articles. You will understand really nicely. Prepare some data and prepare the causes and effect of water crisis. Why there is a water crisis in urban areas, why there is a water crisis in rural areas, or let's say around the world, different reasons why they are facing water crisis. So all these things you will study. Apart from mains, in prelims, this area is very important. So I cannot stress much. You should prepare this area really nicely, and let us, without wasting any time, let us jump into the answer of this question. So first thing first, in the answer, let me discuss the structure of this answer. So you will introduce your answer, then you will make body dimensions, and then you will conclude. This is the basic idea which we have been talking about since the start of these discussions. In introduction, what you will do? So it's a question on water stress. So mention what kind of water do we have? Fresh water, how much do we have? So you can simply write that on the globe we have 3% of water which is fresh, and out of this 3%, we only, as humans, we only have around 0.5%. This is WMO, World Meteorological Organization data, that we only have around 0.5% water which is available and accessible to us. That way you start your answer. Apart from this, you can also mention some news, let's say some flood news or some drought news, or any city running out of water. That way you can also start. But this is a better introduction, that you mention the amount of fresh water we have. You can also mention the ice caps, that you can say that most of the fresh water, the limited fresh water, is trapped in the ice caps, or let's say underground, and we only have a very limited amount of water accessible to us. Apart from writing, after writing introduction, you can make a small map. I could have drawn the map myself, but I thought better, let's be on the safer side. I have pasted a map, outline of world map. What you can do, you can mention that WMO printed this map of water stress area around the world, and you can simply map. This is very logical, very common sense. The India part, the whole South Asia part, the Eastern China part, the Mediterranean, let's say the Middle East, then the Southern African, the Saharan region, the Horn of Africa, the Western American, basically Western American part, and the Western South American part. So you can make a map, a simple map, and point these areas, and then write the WMO map on water stress areas. That way it will be a value addition to you. And you should always, what you should do, you should always put a bracket around your maps or diagrams like this. Fine. So this map is a value addition you can make. It should be very quick. It should not take much time. Within 10-20 seconds you should be able to make this map, because it is a 10 marker. If you are making map, make on the side, and it should be very small, very direct, and always title it figure WMO map on water stress areas around the world. Fine. After discussing introduction, let us jump to the body part of your answer. So in body part, you should make two subheadings, and the subheading should have all these points which are pointing towards reasons for water crisis. One is the availability, and the other is the access to water resources, fresh water resources. So you make first heading as reasons for crisis of availability. Your second heading will be reasons for crisis of accessibility or access to fresh water. That way, and also keep in mind that this is a 10 marker. So if you write 5 points, 4 points, it will be enough. If you are making map, if you are writing a good introduction and a good conclusion, 4-5 points each of the dimension will be more than enough. So how you can think of reasons for availability? Availability means nothing but you can have water. You have water. There is a river flowing beside you or nearby you, so you can get water. That's nothing but availability of water. Let's say you live in Rajasthan, so water is not available. So the point of accessibility only comes when you have water. Fine. So that way you think that I need to think on the supply side, that whether we have water or not. So why there is a crisis of availability? So you can think first of all that we as human beings, we are too many. So you can make a point on population. First is that the population has risen to a great extent, and secondly you write that the population is rising very fast. So not only we right now have water availability crisis because of large population, we will face a greater challenge in future. So you can mention that we will reach around 10 billion population by 2050, and looking at present scenario, we will face a larger challenge on water availability crisis. So demand increases because of population rise. Secondly, you can discuss the agriculture. Why agriculture is very important? Because agriculture is the main let's say user of fresh water. In India, around 70% of fresh water is used for irrigation, and gradually when agriculture is expanding, because we are rising, the population is rising, so more food will be required. More food will lead, either we should improve the productivity of the agriculture or we should expand the area under agriculture. and we will also improve the irrigation of these agricultural fields. But what we are not doing is we are not improving the irrigation methods. So old irrigation methods, for example, the flood irrigation, what happened because of these old practices, the agriculture ends up using a lot of water. So the availability of water for fresh water for us, our use, becomes limited. So that you can mention, and you can mention the example of Punjab in India, Punjab, Haryana, all these areas where we use large scale, we use fresh water at large scale for agriculture purposes. Thirdly, in your mind must be going the industrial aspect. So industries, if you look at the data, industries do not use that much water. What they do is they pollute the water a lot, and agriculture also pollute the water. So we can combine these two things and we can write about pollution. How you can write about pollution? So we may have water available, but it may be polluted, so we may not have the water, so it is as good as not available. So you can write that because of agricultural practices, the overuse of pesticides and fertilizers and over extraction of groundwater leads to large scale pollution of water and becomes non-available. Secondly, you can write the industrialization also leads to pollution. Lack of waste water treatment also pollutes a lot of water. So you can mention some Indian cities. You can mention, for example, Delhi, the Yamuna river. You can mention Allahabad, the Ganga river, or Kanpur, the Ganga river. So that way you can mention that water is there, but it is as good as non-available. So you can mention the point on pollution. Apart from pollution, you can go for uneven distribution. So water is not available equitably all around the world. Certain areas, around 50% of the population, I believe, lives around areas which will face 1 month of water crisis every year, and that will be exacerbated because of climate change, rising temperature, the rainfall pattern, change in the rainfall pattern, the floods, the droughts, the deforestation. All these factors will lead to more population, more number of people living in areas which do not have much water. So you can mention that around the world, the water resources, the fresh water resources are not evenly distributed. Certain areas, they have greater access availability of water, and certain areas they suffer, and that will be more exacerbated in the upcoming years. You can mention the data also. Fine. After writing these 4 points, the other important point, I would say important point, you can write the climate change point. Apart from climate change point, you can also mention the ecosystem point, ecosystem or geography point. So what is this ecosystem, geography and climate change point? It's very simple. Climate change point says that the availability of water can be ensured through rainfall. It can be ensured through let's say the all around water availability, the fresh water availability, the evaporation rate of the groundwater, or let's say surface water. So what is happening because of climate change? The weather pattern is changing. So the main source of water, that is rain, that is disturbed. Secondly, around the world, the ice caps are there and they hold a lot of fresh water. What will happen because of climate change? That those glaciers and those ice caps, they will melt. What will happen? The water will be mixed with sea water. So that will become non-fresh water. So the 3% pie will be reduced, and the lesser pie which we have available, that will obviously impacted. So climate change, you mentioned 2-3 lines, or 1 line, 2 line, that first of all rainfall, you mentioned that point, temperature rise, more evaporation will take place, availability of water will reduce, and third you write about the glaciers. The geography or ecosystem point, you bring in the watershed management, the ecological services. You say that because of biodiversity loss, or let's say destruction of wetlands around the world, around 50% of the wetlands are already disturbed or destroyed. So you mention that point and say that ecological services have been affected, and the ecosystem's ability to recycle and recharge the groundwater and clean the water has been destroyed. So availability of water is obviously destroyed. So these 7 points you write. After discussing the first dimension, that is the reason for crisis of availability, you jump to the other part, that is reasons for crisis of accessibility. Let us discuss that. So write a subheading. That subheading will be, the second subheading will be the reasons for crisis of accessibility. So what is accessibility? You should know, and that will make it very easy for you to write points. So think of reasons because of which people will have water. Availability will be there, they can see the water, but they will not be able to use it effectively. For example, drinking. River is there, water is there, but they are not able to drink it because it may be polluted, it may not be treated, or it may not be clean to drink, or even if they drink, they will fall sick. Let's say rainfall is happening, but the rainfall will run away to the rivers, and then those rivers will take the water to the sea. For example, Meghalaya has one of the highest amount of rainfall, but it is also a drought prone area. Why? Because we are not able to store the water and have it for our use. So water is available, but we are not able to use it. So accessibility is that part. So think of reasons for crisis of accessibility. So the very first point that you should write about is about infrastructure. So you can now imagine, so infrastructure for what? First of all, to source water, to treat it, to distribute it, and then to recycle it. That will make sure that everybody has water. So accessibility can be ensured by this. Because of infrastructure, we do not have it. Majority of African or South Asian cities, they do not have proper infrastructure. Let's say pipelines, they do not have proper supply of water, the supply is not timely, or let's say supplied water is not treated well. For example, Delhi also, in one of the richest area, you will not get clean fresh water. So accessibility is hampered because of infrastructure. In this infrastructure only, don't write in infrastructure, go for this point on rural area. I would want you to mention this word, rural area disparity. It is very important that you bring in these terms. So what happens in rural areas? This we were talking about cities. In rural areas, the water is clean. You may not need it to treat it. But what happens because of social conditions, because of lack of infrastructure and funding, there is literally zero infrastructure. Recently, we have focused on Har Ghar Jal mission that has improved the conditions, but for the larger part of the time or history, rural areas did not have proper water supply mechanism. So rural area disparity is there because of absence of infrastructure or social conditions. Certain population in rural area, they are not able to access the fresh water which other population has, specifically in India. In Africa also, water is a major political issue, and there are certain communities, certain tribes, they are not able to access certain water areas that you can write. Fine. After writing this rural point, you can simply go for mismanagement. So UPSC already asked on mismanagement a question in 2019 or 18, I think. So mismanagement. For example, I'll explain you with example. The Amazon and the Nile River. These are one of the longest and one of the largest rivers around the world. But you know that in Africa and in South America, both areas suffer from water crisis. So why? It is nothing but mismanagement of the water resources. In Delhi also, the Yamuna is there, but Delhi faces a lot of water crisis, accessibility to water. That water is there, but we are not using it effectively, or we are not able to use it effectively. So mismanagement of water resources means that the available water resources, for example, the ponds, the rivers, the let's say the rainfall, all this water is not collected, not treated, and we are not able to use it properly. Use the example of Africa and South America. Fine. Apart from this, you can write one more point on, let's say, transboundary water dispute. Water disputes. So this is nothing but, this is not only restricted to South Asia. We have issues with Pakistan, but we have a treaty. We have issues with China. We do not have a treaty. But in Africa, if you look, Google a little bit, in Africa, majority of rivers are under disputes. For example, there is a dam in Ethiopia. There is a big dam, and that came under a dispute, and many people suffered from water crisis. In India, intra-country water disputes are there. For example, India is a prime example. The Karnataka and Tamil Nadu Kaveri issue, that the people are not adequately able to or amicably able to share waters. Certain area, if they share water, they will get water scarcity. But certain areas which are supposed to, the lower riparian area, they are supposed to get water, they are not getting water. So all these transboundary, interstate, intra-country, inter-country water disputes lead to what? They lead to non-accessibility of water resources or ineffective use of the available water, and that's nothing but inaccessibility of water resources. Apart from this, you write a bit on urbanization. So how you can write on urbanization? That in urban settings, specifically in poor countries, the accessibility to water is dependent on economic reality of people. For example, in certain area, the rich, they are able to get fresh water throughout the day. They can switch on their motor, they can get fresh water. But in that area, beside that area, there will be a slum and they will not have fresh water. So there is a disparity in urban area. Why? Because the urbanization is nothing but is happening because of over urbanization. The urbanization is not planned. Nobody is looking or planning for, let's say, infrastructure to supply fresh water. So all these points will sufficiently explain your reasoning for the crisis of non-accessibility of fresh water. So what you should keep in mind when you see the word world, so you should use examples from around the world. Do not use or restrict yourself to India only. That will happen with many people. They will start writing answer and they will restrict their examples to India only. Always go outside India when you see the word world. So the question is discussed, the introduction is discussed, the two body parts are discussed. Let us now jump to the conclusion part. So in conclusion, it is very simple. On these kind of topics, it is nothing but this is a question on water crisis. So you come to a way forward. So one idea will be way forward. So way forward can be, you can pick a hint from UPSC only. You mention this word, rainwater harvesting or water harvesting. You can write that effective use of new technologies such as water harvesting. If they are made effective, we can replenish the available freshwater resources and make it sustainable. And the issue of availability and access can be resolved. It can be a very simple conclusion. Apart from this, you can mention the international cooperation on sustainable development goals. So sustainable development goals also have freshwater as a goal, that we have to ensure that everybody has access to fresh water. So you can mention this, and you can mention the same idea that on international level we have to cooperate and we have to make conventions to make sure that water is available to everyone and accessible to everyone. That way you can basically write this answer. Fine. You will have your own idea. This is a very simple topic. You have been reading since your school days. So write your answers, submit your answers. This is completely a free initiative, keep in mind. And I would wish all the best for this answer. Thank you.